There is a moment that happens to certain people, usually alone, usually at night, when they finally admit something they've hidden for years. It isn't loneliness. It isn't social anxiety. It's the exhausting realization that they can see through almost everyone around them. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that gift becomes a prison, and the one thing that finally sets it free. Picture a dinner party. Laughter fills the room. Everyone seems relaxed, engaged, having a wonderful time. Except one person. They're smiling too, nodding at the right moments. But inside, something else is happening. They're not hearing conversation. They're watching a performance. And they already know how it ends. This is what psychologists call heightened social pattern recognition. For most people, a compliment is just a compliment. A smile is just a smile. But for this small percentage of the population, every gesture is data. Every pause, every inconsistency between what someone says and how their face moves, it all gets processed instantly, whether they want it to or not. We call this segment 1, the invisible theater, because that's exactly what social life becomes for these individuals, a stage, and everyone else is performing a role they don't realize is a performance. The tragedy is that no one else can see the strengths. Only they can. And that isolation begins long before anyone calls it isolation. But here's the question almost nobody asks. Why does this happen to some people and not others? Is it trauma? Is it trust issues? The real answer is stranger and far more physical than anyone expects. It starts not in the heart, but in a 3-pound organ that never learned how to rest. Segment 2, the hardware problem. Inside the brain sits the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for decision-making, social judgment, and threat detection. In highly sensitive, high-pattern recognition individuals, this region doesn't just process a conversation, it cross-references it against past conversations, against micro-expressions, against tone shifts lasting a fraction of a second. Here is the part that changes everything. For most people, small talk releases dopamine, a reward chemical. It feels good, easy, social. But for the pattern recognizer, that same small talk floods the body with cortisol, the stress hormone. Their brain isn't relaxing into connection. It's bracing for inconsistency, like a smoke detector that never turns off. So when someone like this says, socializing exhausts me, they are not exaggerating. Their processor is running calculations most brains never attempt. And once you understand that this is biological, not emotional weakness, something shifts. But knowing the mechanism isn't the same as living with what it eventually shows you. And what it shows you cannot be unseen. Segment 3, the shattered glass effect. There is a specific moment. Almost everyone with this trait remembers it. When the mask slips on someone they trusted. A friend's kindness reveals itself as strategy. A partner's affection reveals itself as leverage. And in that instant, something breaks that never fully repairs. It's called the shattered glass effect because that's exactly what it feels like. Not a slow realization, but a sudden fracture. Once you've seen the puppet strings on one person, you start noticing them on everyone. The compliment that comes right before a request. The apology that isn't followed by change. You can't unlearn how to see it. And this is where the gift becomes dangerous. Not because the person becomes cruel, but because clarity, left unchecked, starts rewriting how they see everyone, even the people who never lied to them at all. There is a trap hidden inside this superpower. Most people who have it
never see it coming until they're already living inside it. Segment 4. The invisible trap. Psychologists call it negativity bias, the tendency to weigh negative evidence more heavily than positive evidence. For a pattern recognizer, this bias compounds. One inconsistency can outweigh 10 genuine moments. And slowly, without realizing it, they begin building walls, not to protect their peace, but to fortify their isolation. This is the quiet danger nobody warns you about. The same sharp perception that protects you from manipulators can start flagging innocent people as threats. Silence stops being a boundary and starts being a fortress. And a fortress, no matter how well built, still keeps you locked inside it, alone, mistaking safety for freedom. So how does someone with this trait survive without becoming a prisoner of their own perception? The answer isn't therapy in the way most people imagine it. It isn't forcing yourself to trust more. It's something far more strategic and far more misunderstood by everyone who's never had to live this way. Segment 5. Strategic disappearance. What looks like withdrawal from the outside is often something else entirely on the inside, a system override. Think of attention as currency. Every shallow interaction, every performance you have to decode, spends it. And at some point, the brain does what any overloaded system does. It shuts down non-essential processes to prevent a crash. This is why people call it monk mode. Not because they've given up on people, but because they've opted out of a rigged game. A game where authenticity loses to performance 9 times out of 10. Disappearing isn't defeat, it's a recalibration. And recalibration, done right, doesn't end in permanent isolation. It ends somewhere far more specific. Because here's what almost no one tells you. This radar you've spent years resenting is also the most precise instrument for finding real connection that exists. It just requires you to stop using it as a weapon against everyone and start using it as a filter for the very few people worth letting back in. Segment 6. The 1% and the new life. Somewhere among the noise, there exists a small percentage of people whose words and micro-expressions actually match. What they say lines up with what their face does. What they promise lines up with what they do next. Your pattern recognition was never broken. It was simply never given anyone worth pointing at. When you finally meet someone like this, something unusual happens. The cortisol doesn't spike. The cross-referencing quiets down. For the first time, your brain isn't bracing. It's resting. That feeling, the one you may have mistaken for boredom or no spark, is actually the rarest sensation your nervous system knows. Safety. So, if you've spent years wondering what's wrong with you for pulling away from people, nothing is wrong with you. Your mind was built to detect the theater, and it did its job perfectly. The real work now isn't learning to trust everyone. It's learning to recognize the 1% who never needed the mask in the first place. And that search begins with the people who taught you to build one, long before you knew you were doing it. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.